For 3 decades straight, NVIDIA has released at least one new gaming GPU every single year. Through crypto booms, pandemic shortages, and supply chain chaos, every year without fail, gamers got something new. Until now. 2026 marks the first time in over 30 years that NVIDIA won't launch a single new gaming graphics card. Not a refresh, not a super variant, nothing. The next generation RTX 60 series has been pushed back to 2028. In other words, PC gamers are looking at a potential 3-year drought of meaningful upgrades. Why does this happen? What's the real story behind all this? Continue watching to find out. Internally codenamed Kicker, the RTX 50 Super refresh was actually finished. The designs were done, specs were leaked, and manufacturers were ready. The RTX 5080 Super was supposed to get 24 gigabytes of GDDR7 with a 415-watt power limit, up from the base 5080's 16 gigabytes and 360 watts. The 5070 Ti Super was also planned for 24 gigabytes, and the 5070 Super would have jumped to 18 gigabytes with more CUDA cores. These weren't just minor spec bumps. That memory increase addressed the single biggest complaint about the RTX 50 series: inadequate VRAM for the price. Finally, a $600 card with enough memory for serious 4K gaming and AI workloads. Finally, something that made sense. But in December 2025, NVIDIA leadership pulled the plug. No new timeline, no apology, just gone. The problem was that those upgraded cards required 3 gigabytes GDDR7 memory modules instead of the standard 2 gigabyte modules. And those high-density modules are basically impossible to get right now because of what the industry is calling Ramageddon. Memory manufacturers like SK Hynix and Samsung have their production lines booked solid. SK Hynix has already confirmed its high-bandwidth memory is completely sold out through 2026, with customers secured for all upcoming output. When NVIDIA came asking for 3 gigabytes GDDR7 modules for gaming cards, the memory makers essentially said, "We're making more money selling to AI companies. Figure it out." NVIDIA's official statement tried to soften the blow, saying demand for GeForce RTX GPUs remains strong, while acknowledging memory supply is globally constrained. They're working closely with suppliers to maximize availability for existing cards. Do you notice what's missing? Any mention of new products. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Let's talk about why NVIDIA made this decision, because once you see the numbers, it becomes painfully obvious. In the first 9 months of 2022, gaming GPUs accounted for roughly 35% of NVIDIA's total revenue. By the same period in 2025, that figure had collapsed to just 8%. Gaming went from being NVIDIA's bread and butter to essentially a rounding error. But it's not just about revenue share, it's about profit margins. NVIDIA's AI chips deliver operating margins of approximately 65%, while gaming graphics cards sit at around 40%. When you're fighting for the same scarce memory chips, that 25-point margin difference isn't just significant, it's decisive. Think about what this means in practical terms. A single data center rack filled with AI accelerators can generate more profit than hundreds of thousands of individual gaming cards. When Jensen Huang looks at his supply chain and sees limited 3 gigabyte GDDR7 modules, he's not thinking about helping gamers hit 144 frames per second in the latest AAA title. He's thinking about selling $40,000. Each 100 chips to Microsoft, Amazon, and every AI startup burning through venture capital. NVIDIA's data center business now accounts for a staggering 92% of the company's total revenue. This isn't a graphics card company anymore. It's an AI infrastructure company that happens to still make gaming products. But wait, it gets worse. NVIDIA isn't just refusing to make new gaming cards. They're reportedly slashing production of existing RTX 50 series GPUs, with some reports suggesting cuts of up to 40% in the first half of 2026. You know what happens when supply drops and demand stays constant? Prices go up. We're already seeing this play out in real time. The RTX 5070 Ti now costs over $1,000, while the RTX 5080 is selling for $500 or more above its original price. And that's for cards that were already considered overpriced at launch. NVIDIA has restructured its production strategy to prioritize models with the lowest GDDR7 memory consumption. Cards using the same memory configuration are now competing against each other internally, with NVIDIA giving priority to whichever SKU has the highest profit margin. The RTX 5070 Ti and RTX 5080 both use similar memory setups. The 5080 gets priority because it sells for more. This isn't a company managing a shortage to serve customers fairly. This is a company maximizing revenue per chip while supplies last. Normally, when a super refresh gets canceled, you'd think, well, at least the next generation is coming soon? Not this time. The RTX 60 series, based on NVIDIA's Rubin architecture, was originally planned to begin mass production at the end of 2027. Notice the past tense there. That timeline has now been pushed back, with most analysts expecting we won't see RTX 60 cards until sometime in 2028. Let's do the math. The RTX 50 series launched in early 2025. If the RTX 60 series arrives in 2028, that's a 3-year gap between major GPU generations. For context, NVIDIA has historically operated on a 2-year cycle for new architectures, with refreshes in between. We've gone from a steady drumbeat of innovation to silence. Why? Same reason as the super cancellation memory. Manufacturing lines for HBM4, which is critical for AI GPUs, are consuming the same raw materials and fabrication capacity required for consumer GDDR7. It's not just about memory chip shortages anymore, it's about the entire production ecosystem being reallocated away from gaming. Those products are far more profitable than anything in the GeForce lineup. So if memory allocation continues favoring AI, which it absolutely will, and next-gen gaming cards face the same challenges the RTX 50 Super just hit. The term you keep hearing is Remageddon, and it's not hyperbole. This is a genuine crisis that's reshaping the entire consumer electronics industry. AI data centers are consuming memory at an absolutely staggering rate. When you're training large language models or running inference on millions of simultaneous queries, you need massive amounts of high-speed memory. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, they're ordering these chips by the hundreds of thousands. In 2023 alone, both Microsoft and Meta purchased approximately 150,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs each, significantly outpacing other cloud providers. Every one of those AI accelerators needs high bandwidth memory. Every server blade, every training cluster, every inference engine, they're all fighting for the same silicon substrate, the same manufacturing capacity, the same skilled labor that would otherwise be making memory for your gaming PC. And here's the brutal reality. Memory manufacturers have essentially locked up supply with long-term contracts. They're not going to suddenly pivot back to consumer products when they've got guaranteed revenue from AI giants. Why would they? The AI boom shows no signs of slowing, regulatory frameworks are being built around it, and the profit margins are exceptional. Industry experts are projecting this shortage to last months or even years. This isn't a temporary blip that gets resolved by Q3. This is the new normal. Even outside of NVIDIA, the impact is massive. Valve cited the worldwide memory shortage as a reason for delaying the launch of its Steam machine. PC manufacturers are warning that overall PC prices could jump 20% or more. This isn't just about graphics cards, it's about the entire ecosystem. So what are your options if you're a PC gamer right now? Let's be honest, they're not great. Option 1, buy an existing RTX 50 series card at inflated prices. You're looking at $600 plus for a 5070 with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, $1,000 plus for a 5070 Ti, and if you want a 5080, prepare to drop $1,500 or more. And these prices aren't coming down. With production cuts and no new competition on the horizon, expect them to stay elevated or even climb higher. Option 2, stick with your current GPU and wait. Maybe you've got a 3080 or a 4070. Here's the problem with waiting. You might be waiting until 2028. That's potentially 3 years on the same hardware. Can your card handle games releasing in 2027? Maybe, but you're definitely not getting the experience you want at high refresh rates or max settings. Option 3, look at AMD. Except that AMD is facing the same memory constraints. Reports suggest talk of AMD's next generation RDNA 5G PUS has gone suspiciously quiet in recent months. They're not immune to Remageddon either, and with AMD already warning of double-digit sales declines in their gaming segment for 2026, don't expect them to ride in as the savior. The harsh truth is that we're entering a period that experts are calling optimization rather than innovation. Game developers are going to be targeting hardware that's effectively frozen in the 2025 era. That means optimization patches, better software upscaling, more efficient engines, anything to squeeze more performance from existing silicon. Technologies like DLSS and FSR become even more critical. When you can't upgrade your GPU, frame generation and AI upscaling are the only ways to keep up with demanding new games. Software will have to do what hardware normally would. Step back for a second and think about what this really represents. This is the definitive end of the graphics era and the total ascent of the AI era in computing. For 30 years, PC gamers were the primary drivers of GPU innovation. We funded the R&D that made modern graphics cards possible. Our demand for better performance, higher resolutions, and more realistic graphics pushed NVIDIA to develop technologies that eventually enabled AI to exist as we know it today. CUDA, tensor cores, parallel processing, All of that came from trying to render better graphics. That relationship has now completely inverted. AI is the driver. Consumer gaming has become what NVIDIA internally probably considers a legacy business, something they'll support because it still generates revenue, but not something that gets priority when resources are limited. Jensen Huang has effectively decided that NVIDIA's future lies in selling AI infrastructure to enterprises, not gaming cards to enthusiasts. And honestly, from a pure business perspective, it's the right call. The numbers don't lie. When your data center business is growing 142% year over year and represents 92% of your revenue, you optimize for that. But that doesn't make it any less painful for the community that built this company. The gamers who bought GeForce 256 cards in 1999, who upgraded every generation through the 8800 GTX, the GTX 480, the 980 Ti, the 1080 Ti. That loyalty is being rewarded with supply cuts and radio silence. We're going to see some interesting shifts in gaming as a result of this. Handheld gaming PCs and cloud gaming services are expected to see a surge in popularity as discrete desktop upgrades become prohibitively expensive. Why spend $1,500 on a GPU when you can buy a Steam Deck OLED or an Asus ROG Ally for $500 to $700 and get a complete gaming experience? Why build a $2,500 PC when you could subscribe to GeForce Now or Xbox Cloud Gaming and stream high-end games for a monthly fee? We might also see renewed interest in older hardware when new cards aren't. Coming and existing cards are overpriced. Suddenly that used RTX 3080 on eBay starts looking pretty good. The secondhand market could get extremely active. Console gaming also becomes more attractive by comparison. A PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X delivers solid 4K gaming performance for $500. No driver updates, no compatibility issues, no wondering if your card has enough VRAM. Just plug and play. When the price gap between console and PC gaming widens this much, a lot of people will take the easier path. So where does this leave us? The honest answer is, we don't know. Some industry observers believe we might see the RTX 50 Super Series resurface in 2027 if memory supply improves, but that's pure speculation at this point. NVIDIA hasn't committed to anything, and given how profitable AI chips are, why would they? The memory shortage isn't going away quickly. Asus representatives have suggested the shortage should start to normalize by 2027, but they've also noted that nobody wants to be the first one to lower prices. Even if supply improves, manufacturers have gotten used to higher margins. Why would they volunteer to make less money? The real question is whether this becomes permanent. Is 2026 an anomaly, or is it the new normal? Are we looking at a future where major GPU generations come every 3 years instead of 2? Where gaming cards only get released when there's leftover capacity from AI production? NVIDIA clearly doesn't see gaming as strategically important anymore. That much is obvious. Whether they re-engage with this market when memory supply normalizes, or whether they've permanently deprioritized consumer graphics in favor of AI infrastructure, that's the trillion-dollar question. For the first time in 3 decades, NVIDIA has abandoned PC gamers, not with an announcement or an apology, but with silence. The RTX 50 Super refresh that was supposed to fix the memory problems of the base cards? Canceled. The RTX 60 series that should have been coming in late 2027? Delayed to 2028 or beyond. This is what happens when you become a footnote in a company's financial statements. Gaming went from 35% of NVIDIA's business to 8%, and apparently 8% doesn't buy you much loyalty. If you were planning to upgrade your gaming PC this year, I've got bad news. You're not NVIDIA's priority anymore. AI data centers are, and they're willing to pay more than you ever could. Welcome to the GPU drought of 2026. Get comfortable. We're going to be here a while.